Not long ago, I was making my way home from work. I was taking train as I always do. A very busy train, a little later in the evening as I was working until 7 that Thursday. And as much as the train was absolutely nothing unusual, on one of the stations, a young girl, she joined my carriage. And again, it wouldn't be anything out of ordinary about her if it wasn't for the fact that she spoke on the phone, and she spoke with such volume that it was simply impossible not to be part of the conversation she had with the other girl. A couple of people looked at her. They kind of gave her the disapproving looks, but nobody really did anything at all. And as the train continued moving from one station to another, the train would also get a lot busier. And at some point, the girl, she must have found something extremely amusing because she cracked a joke. And she said to her friend on the phone, "You know, girl, you know how they ban people from bringing bicycles on the trains when it's busy? I really think they should do the same thing for fat and smelly people, don't you think?" I looked up at her and was trying to give her a signal of how inappropriate that was. But I didn't get to do that because as I looked up at her, I noticed that the small crowd of people in my carriage, they started looking in a very specific direction. They started looking somewhere. I couldn't quite tell. I am 5 foot tall, and usually when I'm in a crowd, I don't see much of the world. But I couldn't, resist the temptation, so I had to look in here and there. And then I saw this young lad standing right in the corner of a carriage, just close to the doors. And for some crazy reason, by that time, nearly the whole carriage was staring unapologetically at him. He wasn't fat, but he was a well-built, rounded fella, and for some reason I thought everybody must have been thinking that the girl's joke was about him. I thought to myself, my God, how embarrassing must that be? And the young lad quite literally within seconds turned purple of embarrassment. My heart went out to him, and as soon as the doors opened, he just stormed out of the train. I continued my journey, and the funny part was that the girl also continued her conversation, exactly as if nothing happened. And then I realized something amazing. I realized that that girl on the phone, she didn't even know what had happened. She had no clue what damage she just caused. She continued with the conversation, speaking continuously to her girlfriend Jenna on the phone, and she had no clue what damage she'd caused. Moreover, she even had no clue that that young lad existed, let alone be on that train. I thought to myself, wow, what a powerful tool the voice can sometimes become. Such a wonderful gift. We're all so grateful for that. Being able to see, being able to hear, finally being able to speak up. But when I heard that girl at that very moment, I couldn't resist but think that those gifts should come with the label, with the warning, use with caution. And I thought, wow, just 2 seconds and someone's life was crushed into pieces. Someone's confidence, someone's self-esteem was absolutely ruined by somebody who wasn't even aware they existed. As I went down the station, I couldn't quite stop thinking about what had happened. I couldn't quite stop thinking about that young lad, not just because it was so heartbreaking to see young person's confidence in life being broken and ruined, and I could only imagine how damaging this must have been for him, but also because this incident reminded me so much about a specific moment in my life, a moment many years ago, a moment when I was 9 years of age. In fact, on my 9th birthday. I'm not sure how many people who watch this know me, but for those who do, you would know that I come from Poland, and this is a beautiful country, beautiful, very proud, but also very traditional country. Traditional to the point that the word normal isn't just a word, it's nearly a lifestyle. And the normal has quite a specific and quite strong description. You quite frankly either fall into the bracket of normal or you don't. And if you don't, rest assured you'll live to regret that sooner or later, this way or the other. I didn't know that though. I truly didn't know that though. My first 9 years of my life were as carefree as they could have been. I was a standard, typical young lad, hardly ever up to anything good. I was a naughty kid. I was playing with my mates. I really had a normal, what I thought, childhood. But I was just about to find out how wrong I was on that 9th birthday. As my mom and dad invited a couple of children and a couple of friends, I got this beautiful present, a Barbie doll. You must know that was one thing that was slightly different for me, that was slightly different about me, which again, at that time I couldn't quite realise, but I didn't really like the boyish toys. I didn't quite like boys altogether, not at that stage anyways. I liked the girls. I liked playing with their toys. I liked wearing their clothes. Please don't hold it against me. But, you know, to me that was fine, that was totally normal. And so my mother would always know exactly what to buy me for my birthday. And that very time, she bought me a beautiful original Barbie doll. And I couldn't quite control my emotions. I was so happy. You know, when the party finished, I couldn't even go to bed. I was so excited playing with my Barbie doll till late evening. But it wasn't the only reason why I couldn't sleep. As my family still continued celebrating, I could constantly hear my name coming up in the conversation. And you know, me being me, I couldn't quite resist temptation, and I had to get off my bed and I had to get anywhere closer to the doors just to hear what they may have been talking about. Possibly the biggest mistake I've made in my life. As I went all the way to the doors to hear the conversation, I could hear my father complaining about my mom buying that doll. And then I heard him saying, if he doesn't stop acting like a queer, I'm gonna have to sort him out. I couldn't understand much of that. I really couldn't. But what I did understand, there was something wrong, and I had to very quickly run to bed and fall asleep, almost as if thinking, if I did fall asleep, all that would be erased. It would have been undone. To say the least, I couldn't sleep the night. I couldn't sleep for many other nights either. I couldn't quite understand much from what my father said, but that very night, something broke inside me, and for some reason, I can't quite understand why and how, but I just about understood what it was to be normal. And to my horror, and to my huge horror, I realized it wasn't me. I wasn't that. Whatever I was, whoever I was, whatever I was doing, it wasn't right. It wasn't good enough. My father didn't like it. And I somehow just figured out within moments that I had to change that. If I wanted to be normal, if I wanted to be liked by my dad, I had to change that. And so I did. It took me some time, quite a few years, to actually start realizing what it was that my father didn't like so much about me. And then I realized that the only way for me to change that is to change me. To become normal, to be the kind of boy, the kind of son that my father wanted to have. And so I created a character. I created a boy that I hardly understood, but I just knew exactly what kind of boy he had to be, how to behave, how to dress, what to do, what not to do, what to say, what not to say. I created a character. I became an actor. This became my biggest role of my life. and it would have been that way for many, many years. As the time would go by, I would master my act to the T, to such perfection that I could for hours and hours just talk about cars, football, girls, all of those boyish, manly things that other boys would do and talk about, and absolutely nobody would have known, not for a single moment, that I couldn't care less. I had absolutely no interest in any of that. But I just knew this was the right way to behave, this was normal, and all I wanted is to be normal. It took a little while for me to start understanding what it really was that was so different about me. And after quite a few years of research and many, many episodes of Dawson Creek, I started realizing that I was simply gay. And as much as for a short moment in time I actually felt quite relieved, thinking, okay, well, this is what it is then, at least now I know. At the very same time, I also knew that I had to then work double hard to make sure absolutely nobody gets to know about it, nobody finds out. And so the drill was quite simple. I chucked away all my Cher CDs. I promised never ever to sing out loud to Madonna, forget about doing the Vogue dance. I had to convince the whole world I was straight. I had to hide my biggest secret, and I thought I would do the best job ever. I was absolutely adamant to do the best job ever. Sadly, I wasn't meant to live happily ever after as a straight guy, because only a couple of years later I met the guy, a beautiful guy named Eric, and he was special in my life for many reasons. Not only was he my beautiful true love, well, you say that's apart from Shane from Westlife, but he also was the very first person I met in my life that was like me. And it was big, because having to act and having to filter every single word that you say with every of your friend, to suddenly find someone who you could just be normal with, just be natural with, it was something almost hard to get used to. Through him I also met many other gay men, quite a few of them actually, and I couldn't quite believe how many of us there were. And we almost created like this small community, small little family, where we would meet up behind closed doors and quietly just discuss the world. We could be just ourselves for that short period of time. We would really forget about homophobia, about discrimination, about all the dangers that were still outside. We would just be there for a short moment in time, just as the nature, as the world created us, and we would talk about some most ridiculous things, some most deep things, life, politics, what really hurt us. We could express our fear and rage about everything around us. And of course, not forgetting about those most essential conversations when we could for hours just simply analyze the beauty of Patrick Swayze's bum. It was fantastic, it really was. The world outside, however, wasn't changed much, and even though we had some great time together behind closed doors, we still knew we had to continue acting so that absolutely nobody would know what was going on. And so for some people my boyfriend was known as my best mate, for other people he was introduced as a housemate. And a little bit later on, when I came to England, we both migrated to Great Britain, I introduced Eric as my cousin. And only recently someone asked me why cousin, and I really couldn't tell. But it's quite amazing to think how instantly you could come up with some most creative rubbish, quite literally, when put on a spot. The kind of rubbish that just fits the story, and just sounds right for that moment. This is the kind of acting that you just practice throughout your life, and at some point you just become an absolute professional about it. And so you could say that me and Ilek, we lived happily ever after as two cousins. Well, I say ever after for another 2-3 years. When we broke up, you know, a young lad discovered a gay bar, and I think I was quickly replaced for a thinner version. What I didn't realise though is that Ilek was in fact doing me a great deal of a favour. Because at that time, when I was so vulnerable, this was the first time I gained enough courage to, for the first time, speak the truth. And I came out to the very first people in my life. Now, this wasn't planned and it wasn't easy either, as it was such an emotional time of my life. I found it hard from day to day to pretend that everything was okay. Hiding things became super difficult at that time. And so on one of those days, when I was at work, I tried to sneak out to one of the back offices to pull myself together as I would before, hopefully unnoticed. But I wasn't lucky enough, and someone noticed, a colleague of mine named Leslie. She noticed and she followed me to the back office. She saw the state I was in, and I remember when I looked up and I saw her standing behind me, all she did is gave me the biggest hug in the world. She squeezed me, quite frankly, like a lemon, and she just kept cuddling me for about 20 seconds until she looked at me and she said, "You'll be alright, Adam. You'll find another boy. I promise you, you'll be alright." I remember this moment as if this was yesterday, because it took me a few moments to comprehend what actually happened, what she'd actually said. Did I just get outed? Did my life secret get exposed just like that? I couldn't believe what I heard, so I asked, "How did you know?" And she just laughed back at me and she said, "Darling, do you think I'm blind?" Of course I knew. And she said it in such a way as if it was nothing, no big deal. But it was a big deal for me. And it turned out that absolutely everybody in my branch, in my work, also knew for many, many years. And these were the people that also convinced me to phone my mother. And so I did. I phoned my mother about the same time and I told her the truth. And I couldn't believe that the response was exactly the same. She said, "Do you think I'm blind?" Of course I knew. Part of me felt really relieved because nothing wrong was happening. I wasn't being arrested. No one wanted to beat me up. But the other part of me was wondering, was I really that bad at being straight? How come they knew all about it? What did I do so wrong? And I know that this wasn't really a big deal of a coming out story, and it wasn't quite a material for big movie or dramatic book. But to me it was. To me it was, I think, the most important moment of my life. Because this is the time that I, for the first time ever, woke up in the morning and started the day as Adam. The real kind of Adam. Adam, the guy who fancies other guys. The kind of Adam that knows every single word to Madonna's song. All of them, in fact. The kind of Adam that wants to go to a gay bar and comes back home next morning to tell his mother every single detail of it. It was such an important change in my life. But there was one thing that I kept wondering, and funny thing is, I still can't quite stop wondering. Why didn't they tell me anything? Why didn't they say anything? Why didn't they give me any sign or any signal just to make me feel that it was alright to stop pretending that they knew? My mother, my colleagues, all of them. Why didn't they say anything? And I wonder, Could this have been a different story? Could this have been a different life I would live if any of them had done, said something, anything, even sent a signal that I would receive? If I hadn't heard that nasty comment from my father, just like that kid on a train overheard that ignorant girl on the phone, and I can't resist but compare my mom. And I swear I do not blame her for anything, but I can't resist but compare her to those silent people on the train that simply did nothing. They just observed as someone's life was being changed permanently for the worse, when all it took was a word, even a gesture, that would make the whole situation that much better, that would make the whole story that different. Could this have been a different story altogether? I don't think I'll ever know, and I could play the if game for as long as I'd like, and I don't think I'll ever get to any answers. The reality is, my story is a complete one. I have a beautiful boyfriend, Chris. We've been happily together for some time. We're getting married. Well, he doesn't know yet, but we totally are. And I really don't have much to ask for. The story is quite complete, but it's my story. But there's many other people out there, millions of other boys on the train, whose stories are hardly finished. Their stories are waiting the endings. And I know that many of us now listening to my speech, you're thinking, what has it got to do with me? I don't do anything wrong, it's not my problem. Well, it is. Because whether you like it or not, it's all of us, including me, who get to write those stories, who get to write those endings. Whether you are on a train, at work, on a lunch break, in a pub, every word you say, everything you do, every gesture you make writes someone's stories. And you may not know whose stories that is, whose story that might become. But what you can make sure is that whatever story you ever write, it's the kind of story that has a beautiful and a happy ending.